So then they select them all and then delete. Or even will double click that color and just lower the transparency down to 0. I'm interested in your take, Tick Ink, because those are a bunch of different methods. What are your first impressions on hearing those? Does any particular method stand out to you more than the others? That last method with the strokes makes the most sense. The sub-layers of the line art color out just seemed confusing. Yeah, the color outs, the sub-layer thing is predominantly for rigging and a little bit in compositing. If you're going full traditional hand-drawn, I don't think you really need to worry about it at all, if I'm honest. Especially because it's really just going to add an extra step of having to cut and paste everything, every single frame, for what real benefit? It really comes into play on rigging because of you want your line art and color art to perform different functions in the way that they mask into each other and the way they get layered. So you'd probably have like, the color art for the top and the bottom of an arm, for example, the top and the bottom of an arm to go together because their line art sort of looks like this. And then if you're able to sort of separate their color art and then stack that on top, it would create this sort of illusion. So it sort of merges everything together, you know what I mean? But you can still sort of have the loops connected all the way around. The reason why these sublayers exist comes from traditional, though, ironically enough. The idea of it was back in the cell animation days, where you'd be drawing on those clear sheets, right? People would draw their character on one side, they do the inking first like that, and then you pass it off to the colorist, and they would paint by hand on the back like that. And they'd paint on the back so that they had a bit more wiggle room where they could accidentally, go over the lines a little bit and it wouldn't matter. Because by the time you flip it back again and look at the front, everything is underneath the outlines. So that's how it came into existence. It's what actual traditional animators were used to. And it does add that little bit of flexibility. But it is essentially just a name. Yeah. And you might have noticed that my one as well, it's got 2 extra ones. Overlay and underlay. These are turned off in preferences by default. But they just add a little bit more flexibility, especially for riggers where you have, like masking elements that will be invisible to the viewer and they go out and, mask the wrist in and all sorts of weird stuff like that. I think some traditional... Actually, you might find this useful. Some traditional animators like to use the underlay for their roughs, and then they disable it afterwards. Like if you go into layer properties here on drawing. Under the drawing tab, you get the 4 of them here, and you can turn them off. So you can turn your roughs off that way. I think some productions will even use them for note taking, and they'll have their director go through, and they can actually draw directly on the layer and say, good and bad and whatever. Personally, when it comes to traditional animation like that, if you're going to have a rough layer, I think it's easier to just have a new layer in its entirety, just stacked on top. That's just far more flexible because then you can turn it off and on, you can move it at different positions, you can give it different timing, you can do whatever you want. The sublayers are so intrinsically linked, it's weirdly confusing. If you're willing to dig a bit deeper into the channel, Tick Ink, I have a full series on all the sublayer stuff, and they're all very nuggeted videos. Each one is only about a minute long. There's about a dozen of them, and that sort of walks you through the process on what the sublayers are all about from beginning to end. Thanks for watching. Consider following my Twitter for upcoming stream times and topics. Hey, maybe your question or suggestion or whatever will become a video topic of its own, like this one. Previous unedited full streams, as well as any relevant working files if there happens to be any, are available to my lovely patrons. Links for all that stuff and that are in the description. Yay! Okay, bye.